Good morning and welcome back to Fly Fishing Rutland Water. I was fishing on Tuesday, but not filming because I was out with a friend, and I had one of those days that you can genuinely describe as a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Most people come to Rutland dreaming of catching a double-figure brown trout, and doing that once in a lifetime is an absolute achievement. I did it twice on Tuesday. So I thought I'd come back and retrace my steps today. I don't know whether I'll catch any fish or not. The wind conditions are slightly different. The wind is more east-northeast today. It was more northeast on Tuesday. But I know the places where the fish have been sitting, so I'm progressively going to just retrace my steps that I took on Tuesday so I can tell the story, because it doesn't just end there. Normally if you lose a double figure fish, you kind of think that's your chance. The last time I hooked a double figure fish was probably 2008 in Old Hall Bay, and that one came off as well. And I've never really forgotten that or got over it. It's a bit like Macho Grande.
Over Macho Grande?
No, I don't think I'll ever get over Macho Grande.
So I'm fishing the same setup today. Both of the fish, the brown trout took one of these popper minkies, quite a small fly. So this is the fly I used, a little popper minkie. Now what was interesting, the rainbow trout would follow this but not take, but the brown trout were taken. And that kind of tells me that the brown trout are feeding on fry, but the rainbows are not feeding on fry yet. I've anchored because I wanted to be stable while I was telling the story, but we anchored on Tuesday. And every time I lifted the anchor, in amongst the weed, it was filled with snails, crustaceans, shrimp. I mean, there's so much food in the weed that the rainbow trout can feed without really doing anything. So they're not chasing the fry because they don't have to. There's plenty of food in those weed beds. But for some reason, the brown trout have switched on. Well, I learned another lesson as well. Make sure you're set up before you start fishing. Because that net wasn't extended, that's why I lost the fish. If that net had been extended and where it is now, I would have landed that fish. I absolutely guarantee it. When you see the footage, you will know that I would have landed the fish. But doing the same thing this morning, I'm just going to try a floating line with a single minky popper, and I'll just bring it back here, hoping there's some fish cruising in this area. I'll only be fishing floating lines today because the fish have been on the surface all week, and there's a very gentle ripple today. So the fish are going to be near the top of the water. I'm absolutely convinced of that. Now there's a fish just moved to the left of my fly, and it's moving up towards the fly. So I'm just going to leave that popper sitting still in the water. I'm hoping there's more than one fish there. Now the fish is in the vicinity, so I'm going to give the fly a little bit of movement because it should be in the area now. But that's the first fish I've seen on the surface this morning. I mean, it's almost ideal conditions, so you would kind of expect fish to be up on top and showing. But the fish don't always read the books. I'm not going to stay here for too long, because I was quite lucky and caught that brown trout. The same day other people were having quite a bit of trouble. The fish were very, very fussy. So if they're going to take pretty quickly. So if I don't get anything here within the first 30 minutes, I think I'm going to move. When I'm fishing these poppers, I like to let it sit for a little while and then I'll bring it in. So I'm kind of doing the best of both worlds. I'm letting it sit static in the hope that a fish will come and find it, and then I'm also bringing it in and giving it a bit of movement. So you're kind of doing two techniques in one cast, which is quite nice. The weird thing about having caught a big fish is it kind of takes the fun out of fishing because you feel that you've achieved your objective. Last year I caught a 6-pound rainbow off a green bank, and that was the end of June, and I just stopped fishing. I was busy working, and then when we hit the summer doldrums in July, I just never, for some reason, I never got started again and probably missed the best part of the season. I'm going to lift the anchor now and just let the boat drift, because I think it might be worthwhile just doing a couple of drifts from the weed beds into the deeper water. And like before, the anchor's filled with weed, and that weed is filled with nice stuff for the fish to feed on. The other thing I did all day on Tuesday was cast left-handed. Because I was fishing in the boat with Andrew, I took the engine, but I set the boat up so Andrew could fish over the bow unrestricted. And the only way I could fish unrestricted was to fish left-handed over the engine. And I fished an entire day left-handed. Now that's going to be really handy, both off the bank and in the boat. Okay, so we've not had any interest here, so let's go and try a different spot. We've revisited the Bay of the Monster, and the monster has gone somewhere else. So let's us go somewhere else too. Right, we're off Brown's Island here, and we've managed to hook a fish on the popper at last. And amongst the weed beds again. I don't think this is another monster, but it's a nice fish. I decided to move up the south arm rather than going down to Normanton, and it's paid off because we've got a fish on the line on the same fly as earlier in the week. And my net is up and extended, so if this had been something half decent, it would have been on. Come off. Is it come off? No, it's not. It's just wet. Oh, it's come off. Oh well, never mind. Some you win, some you lose. This is a fly I've been threatening to use for a little while now. It's this sparkler booby. They've been kind of ignoring the popper hopper, so I thought if I put something on that was sparkly and irritating that it might get them to take, and that seems to have been the case. So chap's been having the same problems that I have, that the fish are following but not taking. But changing to this fly seems to obviously has got their interest. I mean, I had that fly on for less than 5 minutes before the fish took. As I was saying to the chap, they seem to be ignoring the popper minkies, which a lot of people have been using. So there's definitely fish in and around this area. I mean, these are nice fish. I mean, these were stocked. I think the last stocking was June. So these fish have had quite a bit of time to acclimatise and get themselves nice and fit in the water. I mean, that was no massive fish, but it gave me a very nice tussle. It's also nice to be filming in a part of the reservoir that I haven't been filming for a little while. Well, after a fairly lengthy motor down the reservoir, we're now at my third destination, which is the Normanton bank. So the wind today is perfect for fishing Normanton because it's kind of blowing more parallel to the bank, but it is blowing us in slightly, so we should be able to cover the drop-off and into the weed beds all up the bank. I've got two rods set up. I've got one set up with competition tactics, and I've got this one set up with just a single minkie popper. Having a go with the thistledown line. The the snowbee line. And all I'm doing is just bringing this popper back across the surface in the hope that if there's fish. So I've had a fish on this fly already up at Brown's Island. The second one was on a more garish sparkler booby. Been fish moving up this bank quite a lot. But I don't know if the wind's changed quite a bit. It's now, it was blowing into the bank, now it's, oh, there was a fish right in front of the boat there. Now, there have been shoals of fish moving along this bank. And solitary specimen brownies too. I put the thistle down on the ultralight rod because it's quite an easy line to cast, and if I'm going to be doing quite a lot of rapid pulling casts, it means I'm going to be casting twice as much, so I want to have a line that's going to make it a little bit more comfortable, and this one certainly does that. It's actually quite a very smooth casting line. I'll double haul with it off the bank, but on the boat you don't really need to. If you just get the rhythm right, you can just throw a nice line, the length that you need for boat fishing. I've been fishing this line with my 5-weight rod quite a lot, and I really enjoy it because it's kind of got a lot of precision and control, but it actually works well with the 6-weight rod as well, because it's, you know, if you believe the marketing spiel, the head is a 5, 6 and a 7 rated line, depending on how much of the head you shoot. So with this rod I'm shooting a little bit more. Still don't want to throw a ridiculously long line though, because we don't really need to. So I'm just going to motor along this bank, and this spot here is roughly where I caught that specimen brownie on Tuesday. I was a little bit closer into the bank, but I'm going to try a number of different distances out from the bank as I drift along here. But I'm going to fish Normanton for the rest of the day. It's a really nice spot. I really like it, and this is a wind that makes it fun to fish. So I've done the Normanton drift from the bank nearly up to the blue pipes now, and I've only had one follow. I think it's because the wind direction's slightly different. It's blowing parallel to the bank, and I think I may be a little bit too far out from the weed beds. So what I'll end up doing is going back and repeating the drift, but starting from a little bit closer in, trying to drift over the weed beds rather than drifting over in this deep water that's probably even over the drop-off. I thought I'd lined this up perfectly, but it doesn't seem to have worked out the way that I wanted it to. The wind seems to be blowing us parallel. I came down earlier this week to shoot the various drifts, and the wind was in the perfect direction then, but it just seems to have got a little bit more easterly in it now. It's more east-northeast rather than a straight northeast, and it's just made fishing this bank a little bit more tricky. I normally like to fish out from the deep water and then to come into the bank. This is keeping me parallel to the bank. Now, I'm going to try and show you what's happening here. This is the spot where I caught the fish. And you should be able to see these massive banks of weed just under the surface. This is perfect ground for trout to hide, for the big trout to ambush little prey fish. And that's obviously what that big brown trout was doing here. The water's slightly deeper here, so there's a little bit more, well, there's cover for the fish, but there's also a bit of distance between the top. Oh, fish! Oh! 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 That one came twice. Oh! Just as I was talking about this weed being perfect for cover, a fish comes and takes twice. And this is almost the exact same spot, because I remember those particular trees over there. So just as I was talking about this being the spot where I caught a fish, I turn a fish. So I must come back and do this drift again. This is obviously a particular spot where the depth of water and the weed just make it perfect ground for ambushing fish. I was right in front of the boat, that one followed. Oh, never mind. These things happen. I'd literally just turned the camera back on again just to... It was really to show you the weed rather than to show you a fish following. The weed has disappeared. I need to put us in a bit closer to the bank. This is it. See the depth of weed that I'm aiming for. I don't want to be in the thick weed. I want to be in the spots where the weed has got some space in it for fish to swim through. If you're in the really thick weed, it's just too thick for them to do anything. Now I kind of know why that fish took where it did, because it's perfect ambush territory. But alas, 3 days later, there are no fish to be had. This wind is making it really awkward today though, so I don't know whether I'll persevere or maybe finish a little early today. I'll fish some of the other spots closer up to the church, I think, before we call it a day. I was thinking about going up into the North Arm, but I think I'd rather just do the Normanton drift proper rather than wasting a lot of time motoring 35 minutes up the reservoir. I think if you're going to do the North Arm, you need to get up there early and do it properly. Right, so we're on our final drift of the day. I'm going to drift down from the Blue Pipes down to the Normanton Church, just in the open water. I'm using the competition set up on my brand new Hardy Reef 7-weight 10-foot rod. I've now got the full set. I've got a 9-foot 5-weight Hardy Reef, a 10-foot 6-weight Hardy Ultralight, and this 10-foot 7-weight Wraith. I wanted a heavier rod for fishing the competition setup when it's a bit windy, just like it is today. So today has provided me with the conditions, the ideal conditions, to try out my rod in the conditions for which I purchased them. And it works incredibly well. It's got a lot of power, but it's still quite a light rod. Although it's a fast action, it's actually quite easy to cast. And it just gives me a little bit of strength in the wind, which we kind of need when it's like this. So this is my last drift. This has been quite a frustrating day. It's only 3 days since my specimen triumph, but it just shows you how much Rutland water can change in the space of a few days. I've also just noticed that the aerators are no longer on, because it's September, I guess. We're now officially into autumn, so we don't have the aerators on. I wonder what impact that has had on where the fish are. So I'm going to do this one drift down to the church. I don't know if I'm going to get any fish or not, but it's just a chance to really try out this rod in the conditions that I purchased it to deal with. Well, thanks for coming fly fishing on Rutland water with me again today. I've decided to end the day where I started it, back at Spud Bay. Normanton just was too hard to fish, the wind direction was wrong. There were fish moving in and around the weed beds, but they just didn't seem to want to take. So I decided to come back here, have an hour here, and then head home. Well, if it wasn't difficult enough already, I think that sun is going to make it pretty much impossible now. So I think I'll probably just call it quits. So thanks for coming out fly fishing with me on Rutland water. I'm just sorry I wasn't able to replicate Tuesday's feat of hooking 2 double-figure fish in a single session, but realistically that was never going to happen. It was just nice to come back and revisit the spots and tell the stories of the 2 biggest fish that I've ever caught in Rutland in one day. So as always, if you like the video, please make sure you hit the like button, and I would be delighted if you would subscribe to the channel to see more of my fishy adventures. Thanks for watching.